Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. Before I get to our guest here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Rose Black on the podcast. She's an IFBB pro coming to us all the way from Australia. She's a member of the IFBB Pro League from Australia. And like I said, she's our third Australian guest. And first of all, everyone, I just got to warn you ahead of time. She has that one of those really nice Australian accents. So your ears are going to be melting, basically. And it's going to be some of the greatest things you're ever going to hear. But Rose, we cannot thank you enough for coming on this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so chuffed to be on here.
Yeah, and again, everyone, just hearing that right now, I gotta say, Australian accents are probably my favorite accents. So every time we have a guest come on, it's just unbelievable to hear. But another fun fact for everyone out there: so I'm recording this on a Friday at about 6:00 at night, and it is Saturday at about 8 a.m. in Australia. So we're doing a little bit of time traveling, I should like to say. She's about a day ahead of us. So I always like to bring that fact up because it's just so fascinating, the time difference. But we're here to talk about your fitness journey. So, Rose, why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory on what inspired and what motivated you to get in shape and really adapt that healthy and fit lifestyle?
Well, I've been involved in sport, I guess, from the time I was quite young. I was a swimmer when I was growing up. So I did competitive swimming and spent a lot of time, chasing the black line in the pool. That gave me my shoulders and my back. And then I kind of moved away from fitness a lot I went to uni and through that time, you just kind of move away from sport a little bit. You have other focuses. And I probably got back into sport when I was in my 20s. I went back to swimming, competed as a master, and did really well. I competed at the Sydney World Masters Games in 2009 and I medaled there. I got some gold medals and some silver medals. Actually improved my times from when I was a kid, so it was kind of a chapter closed for me. But the training I found was really tough as an adult, and I started having some shoulder issues. I hadn't really ever done weights before that time. I'd always just done a lot of cardio. So I started experiencing the shoulder issue and was sort of told, look, go to the gym, strengthen up your shoulder, and it will help with your swimming. So that's sort of how I began moving into the weights room at the gym. I started out with some classes, which were just kind of body pump kind of classes, and then gradually moved into the actual gym and started to train properly there. And that's when my physique really changed. And so that was probably around 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I started. And just over that time, as soon as I started going into the weights room and moving away from so much cardio, my physique actually started to change. My body composition improved. I started to get a little bit hippie as a female, getting a little bit heavy around the bottom and the hips. And so that's where I noticed the most massive change and just getting more development through my back and feeling stronger. So it was fantastic. That's kind of what inspired me to originally get into it.
That's awesome, and I always gotta say, especially with swimmers, I have a really good friend who she used to be a swimmer, and I hate hugging her because every time I hug her, just her back, I'm just like, come on, it's ridiculous. It's like trying to climb a mountain, basically. You're just like reaching around like a huge tree, and those swimmers' backs, are just absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, that background is so important, I think, to a lot of people because we have so many guests where either gymnastics or swimming, just having that background in fitness really really helps them out. But one of the things that I love to ask, because I always say this, if you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape, whether it comes down to their diet, their training, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what exercises they do. So many little things add up to the overall package that people end up seeing. Was that a struggle for you when you were getting started, sort of realizing what worked best for your body? Because I always say, if you were to walk up to someone and say, like, what did you train for that body part? It looks amazing. What works best for you 99% of the time is not going to work as good for someone else.
Oh, 100%. Everyone is completely different. And I think I was really lucky that I had amazing people at my gym who could actually, I guess, guide me at the very beginning. There's a guy that I train with, he's still my coach to this day. So my strength and conditioning coach, and he was the one who saw me in the gym and said, look, you can have an amazing physique. Here's what I would train. And so I began training with him, and uh, I think that was what kind of allowed me to kind of concentrate on the things that I needed to improve and not get so overwhelmed with how many different ways there is to train, because there's so many different theories out there.
I mean, every year there seems to be about 10 or 20 new theories that come up or ways to work out. So yeah, it's for so many people just that struggle just to find out what works best for them, I think can just be so hard. But another question that I love to ask, because everyone's genetics are different. I mean, having just the wide variety of answers that I've had in this next question has just proven that, blown my mind completely wide open. But everyone always has that one body part that when they get started training really takes off, that they don't need to train as much. And then everyone always has that one body part that really lags behind, that they sort of have to train into overdrive. I'll give you mine first, because for me, I mean, my back, just because I had jobs all throughout college too and high school where I was lifting and loading, heavy packages into trucks. And basically, you're going to get a really good back or you're going to quit. That's basically the two options that really happen. But also, I am 6'3", so my legs and my lower body are just almost impossible to get it to catch up to anything. I mean, I could lift legs, 4 or 5 times a week and it wouldn't matter. Like, just naturally, just a lean person down below. But what were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
Probably the part that I found was quite easy to train for me was my shoulders. My shoulders have always responded really, really well to training. I find that they just grow, so much so that when I was starting out competing, I was actually told to be really careful about how much I trained them, because they were growing so quickly and they were overpowering my body. So in physique or figure, it's all about the balance between top to bottom. So that was kind of an issue. So I had to work on that and just make sure that I didn't go too crazy on those. My abs kind of come in all the time. I've always kind of got abs.
I was gonna mention that, everyone. She has like some of the best abs I've ever seen. Like, I'll pull up some of her videos and like put them on there. Like, it's incredible.
Thank you. I'm lucky. I'm lucky that way. But glutes and hamstrings and glutes for me particularly difficult to bring up. I'm also very tall, so I'm about 5'10" and a half. So for a female, very tall. So that's about 177 centimeters or so. So yeah, my glutes and my hamstrings tend to be my lagging body parts.
I love her even more, everyone. I love having other tall people on the podcast because we can talk about tall people problems in the gym, because so many times, especially one thing that really did shock me with the bodybuilders and people that are into health and fitness, is the vast majority of them are on the shorter side. Like, I never would have guessed that, where you talk to some of these people and they're like, how tall are you? And they're like, some guys are like, oh yeah, I'm 5'4", 5'5", and I was like, oh, okay, I'm almost like a foot taller than you. So it's really hard. But being a tall person, what are some modifications or what are some ways that you've been able to compensate for the fact that some of the equipment in the gym is not made for tall people?
Yeah, do you know what? Great point. I actually don't train with machines a lot. I train with free weights a lot, just because of the angles that I need to, the plane of motion, I guess, and the range of motion that I need to actually hit my body parts, and particularly the insertion points from muscle to muscle. I need to have free weights where I can go on my own plane of motion and really feel that mind muscle connection. I find that a lot of the machines, particularly shoulder machines, actually create issues for me. I get soreness. You know, it feels like something's going to tear. So yeah, definitely find that free weights for me all the way.
Yeah, I mean, for me alone too, just some of the obstacles that I have to overcome in the gym. There's just stuff that you wouldn't even really think of. Where sometimes you just got to like bend over a little bit and just be crouched down when you're doing exercise, and it's like, oh, it's not supposed to be like that. But at what part in your journey did you decide that you want to give bodybuilding a shot? I mean, I know you said you got into the gym and you started to see these changes, but how long into that before you thought of like, hey, a bodybuilding show? That seems like something that I'd be interested in and I should give it a try.
I was probably training for about 6 months, and we had a little local bodybuilding show that used to happen in Dubbo, and I went along to it. I thought, oh, I'll go along. I'll have a watch, see what it's all about. And I saw these women walking in, and I was like, that's what I want to look like. That is exactly what I want to look like. I want to be lean. I want to have muscle definition. I want to be looking strong still, because what I was finding with my cardio, and just concentrating on that, was that I would get thin, skinny, but I wouldn't get any more defined. I just kind of became a smaller, skinny fat version of myself. And it's not to say that skinny fat is bad, but you know, I wanted to be strong as well. And I found as I was getting older that my strength had been dropping off, and it was important to me to still feel really functionally strong as well. So yeah.
Another benefit of working out, everyone, I'm 24 and she looks younger than me, okay? That's just absolutely ridiculous. That's just one of those things too that isn't really talked about, is just, working out and getting into shape. I mean, really has so many good benefits. But yeah, it's just so great that you had that, experience getting into bodybuilding. That usually helps being a little bit more successful. And I was going to ask you what your favorite exercise is, but if anyone goes and checks out her Instagram page, she has like 500 posts of her doing like pull-ups. So is that like your go-to exercise? Because I was just scrolling through your Instagram right before we talked like last night, and I was like, okay, Jesus, how many pull-ups does she do? But is that your go-to exercise?
I love it. I love pull-ups. I guess that for me when I first began training was it was like a milestone. It was like I wanted to be able to do a pull-up on my own. And I used to actually have my coach used to have to grab me by the legs and like push me up and down on the bar. And I was like, right, much as I appreciate that help, I need to do this on my own. So that was my goal. And then once I was able to do that, it was then the next step was like, okay, how many can I do? And I found that it was so great for creating width. Again, being a tall girl, having the width through my lats was really important to make my waist look smaller. And it just, that was the exercise that I found that created that for me the most.
And being taller too, I always got to mention, because like you said, there is a lot more space to fill out. Do you find that it's been harder for you than it has for maybe some of your shorter competitors when it comes to putting on that muscle, just because you have so much more length to deal with and so much more to fill in, as opposed to someone who's maybe like, 160 or 155 centimeters?
Yeah, look, I am a very lucky person in that I do add muscle quite easily. But I have so many women message me who are taller saying, "Oh my God, how have you done this?" Because it is really difficult. I do find it though in certain body parts. So my biceps, because I'm so long, my arms
Yeah.
are so long, that I find it really difficult to fill them out and make them look full, round. Same with my calves,
Well, give us
although
a
they're
front double bicep. Let's see how she's filled them out, everyone. Yeah, look at that. Yeah, okay, that looks great to me. Okay, everyone, she's done a really good job with that. Then, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
yeah, so and maybe with calves as well, a little bit. But that being said, I have found an exercise that's really helping them. So it's just a time and consistency thing. But yeah, I think for taller girls, we do have those long levers. So it's usually the limbs that we struggle with the most. And it was quite difficult to build my legs up at the start. Like the first few shows that I did, my legs were quite stringy. They looked quite skinny. They were muscular, but they were quite skinny. So it's taken a lot of heavy work to really build them up. Lots of heavy lifting.
You mentioned the unnameable body part, which is calves. I hate talking about because I'm just one of those people, because calves is the one thing where I think, genetically speaking, you either have them or you don't have them. I do not have calves at all. And I see some people that walk into the gym that have calves that are like as big as my thighs. And I'm like, okay, that person has never trained calves a day in their life. So yeah, that's if we're going back to body parts that I struggle with, calves by far is my go-to. But yeah, I mean, it's just so fascinating to see how, everyone's body is different. But I always love to say, if you were to go and talk to the general public, most people don't realize that to be able to get into shape, to go on a prep, takes so much hard work, determination, dedication that, I mean, 90% of the general public wouldn't be able to do it. But going on a prep, that is notching things up to an extreme level when it comes to, you got to get all of your meals right on time. You got to get all of your workouts done. I mean, everything just becomes so scientific. What was that adjustment like for you when you started your first prep?
Oh wow. Well, I actually prepped myself for my first two shows. I prepped myself. And I'm like, look back on that now and I'm like, girl, you had no business doing that. what were you thinking? You should not have gotten on that stage. And my photos from that first comp are hilarious. I was literally, I didn't even know how to tie my bikini. I actually tied my bikini up at the back instead of like connecting it in with the connectors because I had no idea what I was doing. The diet was definitely the hardest thing to get my head around. I basically I just tried to research a little bit, asked a guy at our local store, what should I eat? He was like, you need protein. I was like, what's protein? That's how much of an education I had to go through. So I guess that's why I always say on my Instagram page that if I can do it, anyone can, because I literally started with really, even though I'd been into sport, I had no idea about nutrition and how much it can enhance your results. So yeah, really difficult at the start to get my head around that, what macronutrients were, how much of each thing that I needed to have. By the second prep, I got better. Actually, I won that show. It was a show run in Sydney. I was in a natural league at that time, called IMBA, and I basically won 3 divisions that one day, and I thought this is the sport for me. And then I got a coach. After I got a coach, that was much better. He was able to educate to me and explain to me why I had to eat the way that I did, what it was doing for my body. And once I started to understand those, core principles of nutrition, and educate myself more in that realm, it became easier to stick to the diet because I understood why I had to do it and why it was so good.
That's why I always say get a trainer. I mean, we've had people like you come on and say, like I did it for the first few times myself, and I always got to just sigh whenever I hear that. It's like, oh no. Oh no. But yeah, we had one person who was just a genetic freak who just won their first show just by doing that. But I mean, it's doing it yourself. I mean, that can just add on so much more pressure to the person. But I always love to ask, when you go into your diet for prep, what is the number one food that you miss the most?
Probably the one food that I miss the most. Wow. Okay. Chocolate. I love chocolate. I'm a massive chocolate lover, and I do miss it a lot during prep because I'll sort of treat myself maybe in my off season. I might have it once a week or probably more once a fortnight. Sometimes it's just dark chocolate, but during my prep, because I tend to get the taste for it, I cut it out completely because otherwise I tend to overconsume a little bit.
One of my favorite answers was one of the other two Australian guests I had on. One of them answered Vegemite, and I had no idea what that was. So I had to be educated on what Vegemite was. I'd never heard of it before, no idea what it was. So I looked it up. So yeah, that's a little Australian thing for you, and everyone out there, if you don't know
Oh,
what that
I'm gonna.
is, go and look
Oh,
it up. Yep.
I'm sending you some. I'm gonna
Yeah.
send you some.
Oh my god, I've never had it before, and I've always wanted. I've heard ever since I had that podcast too. I've heard people talk about it. Like I've had friends that went to Australia, and they're like, you have to try it. It's like really really good. So yeah, I mean I am widely open to trying some Vegemite because yeah, that's definitely on my bucket list. And I've also always wanted to come to Australia, so we'll see one of these days if I can get down there. But one of the myths and stereotypes that I love to bust on the show, because I love busting myths and stereotypes on this podcast, probably the number one is, I mean, it's gotten better the last 5 years, but there are still so many women that have that fear where if they go into the gym and they pick up one dumbbell, they do one push-up, they do one pull-up, they're going to put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight and turn into the Incredible Hulk. And I always say to that, you'd be the first ever trillionaire because everybody and their brother would want to find out what you were doing, and they would pay you. I would, me alone, I would pay you my entire life savings just for like one training session, because you have found the secret. I always say, whatever country you're in, the government would kidnap you and do like genetic studies on you so like they could pass your genes down to like everyone else. But yeah, it's so not true. But did you have that fear when you were getting started? And even if you didn't, I bet you still hear that all the time. How do you like to respond to that when you hear that?
Oh wow, yes. I was worried about it. Because I was hippie again. I'd started to put on that weight, around my hips and my bottom. A lot of women do. It's estrogen, it's lots of different hormonal interactions. And so I was really concerned that my legs would get really big and that I would just look more unproportioned. And I think too, I'd seen so many memes and things on Instagram, like showing big, muscly Hulk women, Um, and I was like, oh, I don't really want to look like that. People would say to me as well, like even people in my own family were like, oh, just be careful that you don't get masculine. Just be really careful. Like, oh, I think you're doing a little bit too much. You don't want to get masculine. And what I found now is that I get the opposite. People are really surprised that they're surprised that I have a feminine voice. They're surprised that I look feminine. I love to dress up. I wear dresses. I go to the races and do little things like that. And I love to look glamorous when I can, like most girls. And so people will see me in a dress or in my work clothes, and they'll be like, "Oh, but you look so normal." And I'm like, I am normal. This is normal. Women should be looking, fit and toned, and it's really difficult to grow muscle as a female. It's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to put on. I mean, I wish sometimes that was that easy as
Okay, can you say toned again? Because the way you say it is like the best thing ever.
toned.
My ears are just loving it. Like I'm literally, yeah. I like I said, that accent is just unbelievable. But yeah, going back to that stereotype, I mean, I always say too. I mean, I always tell the story of when I was in college and getting bigger and stronger. One of my friends came up to me and said, I see that you're getting bigger and stronger, and I really want to go to the gym, but I'm just afraid that I'm going to get too bulky. And I told her, I said, listen, the amount of weight that you carry in your purse when we go out to clubs or when we go out to get something to eat weighs more than 90% of the dumbbells in the gym. She had a really heavy purse. No idea what she had in there. If there was like a dead body in there, whatever. I don't know. Women's purses, that's a mystery to me. She went to the gym and, everything really seemed to work out. I mean, it's one of those things where once you step in there and once you realize, that myth is not true, it really, really helps out. But I also love to add on to this question because I think that it's the one thing that impacts women so much more positively than it does men is the confidence boost that working out can give you. I mean, we've heard
Oh,
so many stories of so many people that have been able to, have life-changing events and, have been able to make so many drastic changes to their life just because of that confidence boost that they get from, going to the gym and feeling better about themselves. What has that experience been like from you? Because I always say that's the one thing that you can take from the gym and impact every single aspect of your life. How have you been able to take that confidence boost from working out and how have you applied it to every other aspect in your life?
oh my God, that's so, so true. I'm a different person. I really feel like I'm a different person since I began this journey. And it's truly because of the confidence that I've gained. Just, setting a goal in the gym and being able to lift a certain weight, even if you're starting out small, every time you achieve that set, the next rep, it proves to you, wow, I did that. And then the next thing becomes easier to achieve, and then the next thing becomes easier to achieve, and you're pushing your boundaries and challenging yourself all the time in the gym. And so you're like, wow, that was really hard, but I got through it. And those, I guess, coping mechanisms or those drivers translate into all aspects of your life. You become clearer as well in the way that you think, because your nutrition has improved, so your body's functioning better. It all is like a snowball effect. But mindset is crucial, and it to me it is the key to success in a fitness journey. And I work with women. I'm an online coach, and I can see the transformation that these women that I'm working with are going through. And the biggest transformation is the way they feel about themselves. Um, it's so true.
I always say, you have to really be able to do it mentally more so than physically because I've had so many guests and so many of my friends come on too where they just think, hey, if I just start working out and getting, looking better, I'll feel better about myself. But they don't have the mental aspect of it where they just depend on themselves looking good to make themselves feel better. So sometimes, I've had some people on the podcast too. They're some of the most in shape people on the planet. And they say, like, I still didn't feel good about myself. I was all ripped and shredded. But, if it's not there mentally, physically it can do a little but it's not going to make you happier. You have to make that change mentally. So yeah, I cannot preach that enough. But now one of the biggest things that I was just absolutely shocked by, I never would have guessed this in a million years, but I always say if you're to poll the general public, 95% of the people would never guess this. But I learned this, I had never thought this before, but for a lot of these competitors and a lot of these bodybuilders that we have on, posing is the hardest thing for them. It's harder than your nutrition. It's harder than your training. It's harder than your diet. I mean, I would have never guessed that in a million years, but I like to compare it now to, I mean, you can be a great driver. You can never be a perfect driver. You can be a great poser. You can never be a perfect poser. It's always something that's ever evolving. What has your experience with posing been like?
Oh gosh, my first show, I literally looked like a praying mantis. It was hilarious. Like I watched the video back and I just think, oh my god, what were you doing? But now it is a huge part of my prep. So I have a posing coach called Vicky Arif. We call her the posing queen in Australia. That's how she's known. She is absolutely fantastic. She's been in the industry of bodybuilding her whole life, and she's in her early 60s now. So she's has this amazing, history of helping women pose. So she's a dancer by trade, I guess. So she understands how to pose a female, any body type, to maximize your strengths and to minimize the areas that maybe aren't so strong. So I do practice my posing. It is the least thing that I like. I don't enjoy it. I'll be super honest. If, you have to hold the poses for like 30 seconds. You'll hold a front pose and then move into the transition, move into your side pose, your rear pose. And it is intense. Like holding your muscles in that way for that period of time is really tough, but you need to do it because then on stage you can be held up there for a long time. If you have another woman and yourself are very close in physique, and the judges are having a hard time deciphering which of you is the winner, you're going to be up there for a while. So you need to be in posing fitness, and that reduces your sweating on stage and your shaking on stage. So if you can control those things, you're going to look more polished, and the judges are going to be more happy with viewing you.
I always say one of the most shocking things for me is that for a lot of these guests, their posing sessions, some of it is worse than even working out. When it comes to the soreness and the pain, and I've always heard stories about how like the next day after a show, that's some of the most sore that they've ever felt, just because like you said, you could be up there for a long, long time with holding those poses, and the body was not meant to be holding in a flex position, the entire time. But when it comes to the poses, I always find it interesting because I've had some guests on from the UK, and they have poses that are a little bit different than the ones done in the US. When it comes to Australian posing, is the posing done a little bit differently than, let's say, maybe like the NPC poses, or is it more of the same?
Yeah, look, I think it is, and that's something that I'm a new pro, so I became a pro in March at the Arnold Classic in Australia, and so I pose like an amateur, which is kind of we roll our shoulder around, and then we kind of our rear arm is kind of like, I don't know what the word is, but it's kind of like cocked up.
Yep.
That's probably not a great term, but it's kind of like behind us. The American pros tend to pose with a more straight arm behind them, and they twist a lot more. They have a lot of flexibility through their upper back. And that's something I'm working on now because I've noticed that I do pose slightly differently. So I want to be able to fit in with those pro girls, but kind of keep my own style as well. And I noticed that the UK girls, or European girls, tend to pose a little bit more like our Australian amateur girls. So there is a difference between countries, and what I've kind of been told by our local judges is that my posing is really great. But that's one thing we're going to work on, is that rear arm will be a little bit straighter, which I don't like as much because it's hard. It's actually really difficult. You've got to have a lot of flexibility through that upper thoracic spine.
Yep. No, and again, that just goes to just what they have to go through to get these poses. But what is your favorite pose to do, and what is your least favorite pose to do?
My least favorite is definitely the rear pose, and that's because of my own confidence around my glutes, my hamstrings. So I feel, I guess, most exposed in that shot. But my favorite is definitely my front shot. my front symmetry pose, because I do have a nice X frame. I've got, really well developed quads. I'm very quad dominant, which is an issue that we're working through to try and bring up those hamstrings. But it works on stage in that shot. It's my strongest pose.
And I always gotta say though, the one benefit though about that back pose though is that you don't have to be smiling. You can kind of let the gaze down. I mean, you can kind of like get a nice little breath, and you kind of be like, ooh, okay, now I don't
Oh
have to be like,
yeah.
no, I know for guys they don't have a pose like that, but I always say if I ever had to pose like that, that'd be like the one pose where I was like, oh, I can breathe a little bit now, and I can just relax just a tad. But one of the struggles that I will never understand because, I am not a female is the heels that they make you wear when you go on stage. What was that process like for you? Because we have some ladies on here who have never worn heels, and for them that is just, super foreign. It's really hard for them. But did you have a lot of prior experience in heels, and that make it easier going on stage and having to walk and pose in heels? Because that just makes it even harder, in my opinion, than just doing it barefoot.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Look, I'm a heel girl. I love heels. So I'm a very girly girl. So I wasn't challenged, I guess, by walking in heels. What I was challenged more by was the tininess of our bikinis. I remember getting my first one in the mail and being like, oh no, we can't wear that. That's where's the rest of it? So that was probably more challenging for me than the heels. Is just the tiny little. They're so little.
Well, and I always say it's like if they want to ever break the internet, just make the male bodybuilders have to wear heels and then walk up on stage. That'd be probably the funniest thing that I could probably ever see. I mean, that would break the internet. That would be absolutely amazing. But yeah, just another struggle. Like I could literally just chalk up, just make check marks for like every struggle that they make these competitors go through that makes their journey, just so much more amazing that they're able to do this. But now, probably one of my favorite questions. As you can tell, I'm one of the palest people you'll ever meet in your entire life. I have, I'm part Norwegian, British, and German. Which my Norwegian is the most dominant. I'm like half Norwegian, so I got the pale skin where I can't be out in the sunlight for too long. Otherwise, I'm just gonna get burnt to an absolute shred. I've never been tan a day in my life. The competitors that I have on get to get tan for their bodybuilding shows. So I always got to ask, what is that feeling like for you when you get to go on stage and, just be tan basically? Because a lot of times we hear these stories about these bodybuilders who, everything really seems to pop out. You see muscles that you never even knew that you had. What is that experience like for you when you get that tan on?
Oh God, I love it. It's the best. It is the best experience. The whole process of on the day. So 2 days before you'll get your base tan starting to come on. So you usually get two base tans, two, and then 1 day, and then on the morning off you'll get your top coat. And even the two, like the first base coat, it's just like, oh my God, yes, thank God, they're still there. The muscles are there. This is so good. They haven't disappeared because you're feeling quite depleted and flat by that time. Your carbs have been taken out. So we tend to be looking quite flat. We're not full.
I always say it's
And
like the
so
skeleton look, basically.
yeah, yeah, our faces are really tiny, and no cheeks. I lose my cheeks. So yeah, it's amazing. You put that tan on and you start to be like, right, now I'm feeling it. Now I know where I'm at. And then as you start putting the carbs back in, it's like it gets better. And then on the morning, you've got your top coat with the glaze, and so you're just kind of like a shiny statue for the day. It's amazing. I love it. I love being tanned.
Well, I was gonna say the one drawback to that though is that you can't really sit on anything. You can't really lean against anything. I mean, you basically have to become a statue. I mean, you have to bring your own bed sheets. A lot of the competitors talk about doing that. Where I mean, that's just another thing. Like again, chalk up another thing, like another struggle that they have to go through because a lot of people just don't realize behind the scenes what that entails and what they have to go through.
Yeah, we always have to take. You will end up getting. I've had friends have this happen to them where the motel has sent them a cleaning bill, because they've forgotten their sheet. So rule number one, I mean, there's so much you have to remember in like traveling for a show. And because I'm in Dubbo, I travel for every single show. So I literally have like three huge bags. And it's got my sheets, it's got my wipes to wipe down. If you've rubbed against a wall and you've left something there, so it's the baby oil and the wipes, and making sure you don't leave any marks anywhere. So that is really frustrating. Like, um, and even, going to the toilet is it's a kind of maneuver because you don't want to be having any, you know,
Yep. Yep, we've heard that plenty of times, but yeah, that's again just another thing that I mean just what they go through. I mean, chalk it up again. But now I always ask this to all my guests, whether it be, some of the bands that I've had on, the health and fitness guests or any other type of guest. For my bands, I always like to ask, what is that feeling like when you get to go on stage and perform live in front of hundreds of thousands or hundreds to thousands of people? And that also applies to the bodybuilders that I have on. What is that feeling like for you when you get to walk up on stage and show off all of that hard work that you've worked months upon months, or for some people, years upon years on cultivating?
Oh, it is seriously, it's a celebration. And I think that's the difference. I have known some people in my time who hate competing, and I guess I don't really understand that mindset. It's not to say that it's wrong, but for me, the journey is amazing, but then getting on stage is like the pinnacle. It's where you get to celebrate every, you know, the hard times in the gym, the days where you are just really depleted and you've got to do an hour of cardio and you're like so tired and you've got no food coming in, or you've eaten all your meals early in the day because you're just having one of those days where you're super hungry, and then you're just struggling. It's difficult to sleep at the end of a prep because you are so hungry. Your body doesn't want to actually sleep. You're thinking about food before you go to bed because your tummy is so empty. So for me, the day that we get to the stage and we're on the stage is like, this is what it's all for. But I feel like I'm a different person on stage too, because we get so glamorized, the tan and the makeup and the hair and the heels, and the bling. So you're like a princess. It's like a princess for a day.
Okay, this is going to lead me into a story that I've never told on this podcast, and it's going to make a lot of the audience people think that I'm a horrible person, but I promise it was all done in good taste. So one of my friends, when I was in college, he was getting ready for a show. So what I did was I bought a fake hamburger that was like a plastic hamburger, and I hid it inside of his car. Like, and I left like a note saying like a gift for you, like good luck at your show or whatever. It was like the day before the show, and he was carving up a little bit for the show, so I gave it to him. He bit down and he actually bit off part of the plastic because he was so hungry to eat that. And then yeah, he wasn't too happy. But I was like, okay, you're at your weakest, so I can kick your butt now. So like, let's be honest, like I could beat the crap out of you now because I know you're at your weakest now. So like, let's go. But yeah, it was really really funny. So that's the first time I've told that
So
story.
cruel.
But
That's so cruel.
hey, I know I took him out and bought him burgers afterwards. I flipped the bill and I
Okay,
said,
that's
hey,
fine.
here, making up for that. But I said that's like one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. But what was the story behind you getting your pro card? What was that experience like? Because for so many people out there, I always like to say, getting your pro card, I mean, that's just an affirmation of all of the hard work and all of the time and the training that have really took into it. And that's, I mean, like you're a pro. That's really the federation saying like you are good enough. I mean, here's your pro card. That's really the highlight for a lot of people's bodybuilding careers. What was that experience like for you?
Oh gosh, Ryan, that was, I can't even explain to you how much that meant to me. I started out as a natural competitor in a league called the IMBA, and a lot of females listening to this podcast may I guess understand where I'm coming from here. I was always told, well, you're a natural competitor, you can't be competitive in the IFBB. But I was like, well, I've become a pro in the IMBA, or PMBA as it's now known, and I was ready for the next challenge. And even the promoters of the IMBA that I'm still to this day really close with were like, you know what, you're such an amazing athlete, go for it, go give it a go. And they sort of sent me off with blessings. And I am still natural, and I have been able to obtain my pro card. And so that was a really, it was validation for me that any female can do it, and we all can compete. And I know so many beautiful women who are doing this sport, and we're all competing at that high level. But I changed about 4 years ago to the actual IFBB, and the first couple of shows, I didn't even place. I was, you know, back in number fifth, or and that was at local small state shows, and it just gave me more incentive. I just thought to myself, do you know what? This is good. This is why you came over to this league, to challenge yourself, to see what you could improve. And so I just kept going. And each year I'd get slightly better. I would listen to the judges' feedback. And so it was actually my fifth year doing the Arnold Sports Classic, or the first year I did it, it was still known as FitX, but then it became the Tony Doherty Arnold Classic, and um, that I still competed for the next 4 years in that. And so it was year number five that I finally got there and I got my pro card. And here in Australia, we get 2 opportunities a year to become pro. And that's it. We have our national show and then the Arnold's. So it's really, really competitive here in Australia to get your pro card. It's really difficult to get it. So I was blown away. And I'll have to put a video up on my Instagram one day of the actual reaction that I had. I couldn't even walk properly to get my trophy. I was so overwhelmed. I couldn't believe it had finally happened. I pictured it so many times in my mind, you know?
Yeah. And that's so awesome because I love to hear those stories because like she was talking about, I mean, that's the highlight for so many people's journeys just because they realize that, like, hey, I made it. I can do this. And that's just so awesome. But two of the questions that I love to ask, every health and fitness guest that we have on. For the first one, for me, there have been so many benefits to getting bigger and stronger and just having that overall extra level of fitness. But some of the problems that I always run into are that you're always going to get asked to move people's furniture. You're always going to get asked to open pickle jars and stuff like that. I mean, I'm still home with my parents for the next couple of months before I move out, and every single time they come home with groceries, I basically have to lift the car into the driveway and then carry in the groceries. Has that been a similar experience with you where people take one look at you and they just assume that you can do favors for them?
Um, it's really weird. They're like, oh, we don't want to fight you, or they push me forward to be like, well, she'll fight you. Don't say anything bad to me. She'll fight you. And I'm like, I'm not a fighter. I'm a lover. I'm not violent. I'm I'm a really, happy, calm person. And men, they just want to arm wrestle me. So
Yep.
it's really strange.
One thing that I found out is, especially in college, I could never go to a bar with like any cut off shirt, like showing any bit of the arms, because then girls would just come up and start feeling them without even asking. So I'd be like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's well. Let's be honest, I was vain back then, so I'd pump it up a little bit for him and just be like, oh yeah. But yeah, that's and you get like again that arm wrestling thing. Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I've lost a little bit of it now that I've gotten like a regular job and I don't have as much time to work out doing the podcast and this, but still, yeah, I know, sometimes just even walking around, you just get these stares and it can just be hard for some people to adjust to that. And I always say it's always a double-edged sword being 6'3". I mean, I'm getting asked to move people's furniture if I had zero muscle at all. So it's always, oh, tall guy can do it. Tall guy does.
I
So
always get called by my family and they're like, oh, we need this moved, or oh, she'll be able to help us with that. So yeah, known as being strong, being the strong one for sure. But I like that. I
yeah,
like, being able to kind of be functionally fit, and you would feel the same having, moving boxes around and things like that all the time. It's nice to know that you've got that strength in your body, that you can be functional.
yeah. Oh,
And that's
absolutely.
my long-term goal as well.
Well, and that just adds on to the confidence boost that we were talking about too. I mean, that's one of the big ones too, is realizing that you like, hey, I can carry the groceries by myself to the car. Or, hey, I can do all this type of stuff. It's just that just adds on to everything in your average day life. So yeah, again, that's just one of the another benefits that working out can really give you. But now my favorite question to ask, because this is a multi-million-dollar idea for anyone out there. When it comes to clothes for fit women, because fit guys have their own problems, but we always hear, the moment you said that your shoulders really, really took off and they're probably your most defining feature, I always said, oh God, because if you have big, broad shoulders, dresses aren't your best friend. Jeans are another thing that we hear of all the time, where if you have a big lower body and a small waist, jeans are not made for that. What have been some ways that you have found to be able to compensate for the fact that your clothing options can be very limited, being a strong and fit woman, and especially being a taller woman too?
Oh, it's the bane of my life. um, I tend for work, for example, like I will wear shirts that have sleeves, like long, it's floaty sleeves, because getting shirts that um are just kind of like fitted our arms don't fit in there, our shoulders don't fit in, like we're busting out of them. And because we want them to fit our waist, but then our shoulders are so large. So the shoulders are really tight and constricting, but then you've got this really big waist that kind of flops around on you. Same with jeans, or calves, trying to fit your calves if you're a girl who lifts, and your quads into skinny jeans. Like skinny jeans, unless they're like of the stretchy variety, the stretchy jegging kind of material, they're not happening for me anyway.
I always say, you know, we had some guests on here that design clothes, and I always told them, like, hey, if you ever come up with anything for like fit people, let me know, because I have so many guests in here that would be more than willing to get it. But there are some brands, you know, recently that have been making some stuff. So hopefully, you know, in the future, there is a lot more clothing options. Well, now this is a question that I normally ask in the beginning, and I totally forgot to ask it. But what type of training do you like to do? Because we have so many people that, you know, talk about, you know, like there's time under tension, there's, you know, there's vastly different types of exercises that people like to do. Is there a specific type of workout that you like to do, or do you like to do the wide variety of them?
Look, it's mainly weight based, and I'll do a split program. So I'll kind of train shoulders and maybe triceps, and then back and biceps on another day. And then I usually do 2 leg days a week. The time under tension stuff and drop sets, negatives, like all of that stuff might come in from time to time just to kind of change the stimulus. But to be honest, I think people really overthink training, and keep it basic, keep it simple.
Yes.
Just simple, basic moves, and bingo, you're going to get there. People who keep changing all the time, they're looking for the next variety, the next fad. That's why I think why people really struggle with getting results. Like I kind of have trained my shoulders and my back and my legs in the same way with the same exercises for 7, 8 years. Yeah, from time to time my reps might change, or we might go through a phase where I'm doing like squats with a different bar, because we might need to bring up a different part of the glute, or whatever it is. But on sticking with those king moves, your deadlifts, your squats, your bench, and then just your basics like your lat pull downs, your rowing, all those kind of things. I think, yeah, it's keep it simple. Yeah.
I always say, yeah, so many people just overthink it way too much, where I say, you know what, there's a weight, go and pick it up. There, problem
Yeah.
solved. I mean, it's,
If
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If you are just going into the gym and you're forcing those last couple of reps on every single set, you're feeling it, you've got a good mind muscle connection. It honestly doesn't even matter how much weight you're lifting. If you have good mind muscle connection, you can actually improve your physique and grow your muscles. It's all about tearing those muscle fibers. So, any way you can do that is going to get you results. And just kind of repeating that is going to get you there.
Well, and I always say, like, especially for like biceps, I do burnout sets where, like, at the very end, I'm curling like a 5 pound weight, and it feels like it's even harder than if I'm curling a 40 pound weight. So it's just, yeah, like you said, as long as you just have that mind to muscle connection, you can trick your mind into thinking that a 2 pound weight really is like the heaviest thing that you've ever lifted. So it's, I mean, that's just
Yeah.
another fast. I had actually had a psychologist come on and actually talk about that, because he also works out too, and just talking about how you can manipulate things with your mind into, helping with muscle growth. So that was a fascinating conversation as well. But now a few of the questions that I like to ask, every guest, it's sort of like a questionnaire segment where I'll just ask you, so what kind of more of a getting to know you part of the podcast before we wrap things up. So for our first question of the questionnaire, out of all of your followers that you have on Instagram, what would be one thing that you think they'd be surprised to find out about you if they met you in person?
Oh wow. Probably that I like to sing, but I don't do it publicly.
Do you like to have do you have your accent when you sing, or do you like to have, like, because some people when they sing they have like the American, like the plain version, or they have a different version. Do you keep your accent when you sing?
I think I do. I think I do. I've
That's
kind of
even
got
better,
like
damn it.
Aussie.
Oh god. Yeah, and I've always found that fascinating. But yeah, singing. What is your favorite song to sing?
Oh, it, Crazy by Patsy Cline. Like I like the big ballads. Yeah.
Yeah. That's all. Now I gotta ask,
And
being
really old country music. Yeah, I love country music.
now I gotta ask, being Australian, Land Down Under from Men at Work. Are you annoyed at that song like every other Australian that I've had on this show?
No, it's a part of our culture. You know, that's who we are.
Yeah.
In a song, that's who we are.
I was gonna say it's like why didn't they just change that to the national anthem for Australia? Basically, that's honestly what it should be. So yeah, I like I said, I had a friend that studied abroad in Australia, and like every week I'd send him just whenever that song was on the radio, I'd Snapchat him that and be like, oh, your song's on the radio or whatever, and they just be like, oh, he's like, I hear this song like every single day here, and he's like, I'm so annoyed of it right now.
It's on every single radio station. It will be on there at least once a
Mhm.
day. It's like it's a treasure. It's a
Yeah.
national treasure.
Oh, and it's a good song too. I mean, it's like hey, you couldn't have at least they didn't choose like a horrible song for it to be, but it's a really good song. So yeah, I always got to ask that for all of our Australian guests too. And now our final Australian question: have you seen a kangaroo in the wild?
Oh gosh, yes. I'm a country girl, so kangaroos were just basically like running around our backyard growing up. But those things, like they're dangerous, so
Yeah,
you don't want to mess with them. So
I love watching those videos of when they get into those fights and they're like kicking each other. Have you ever seen that too?
oh yeah, oh
Oh,
yeah. I've actually had a kangaroo like spitting at me and just being like, like
yeah,
getting ready to like box with. They actually
yeah,
do this. They get their little, you know, they want to box you.
yeah,
It's really quite scary, and they'll kind of do this little like
mhm.
noise, and if they kind of are getting angry, that noise really increases, and they will come at you. They use their tail to kind of like bounce themselves up, and they can scratch you with their legs. So yeah, it's quite scary. Like I've known people who have actually been seriously injured by kangaroos.
Well, I always got to mention, I love that video where this kangaroo was attacking this guy's dog. So he literally started boxing the kangaroo and he made the kangaroo like run away. But I was like, okay, that's the most Australian thing I've ever seen in my entire life is a guy boxing a kangaroo. But yeah, I mean,
I've seen that video.
yeah, I
Yeah.
always got to ask about kangaroos with Australian guests too, because I mean, I'd hate myself if I didn't ask. But now our last few questions of the questionnaire, if you could go back in time and talk to the 18-year-old version of yourself, what would be the best piece of advice you would give her?
Wow. Okay, great question. I would just tell her to believe in herself and trust herself, and that she can do anything that she puts her mind to.
I always say that too. I mean, if I could go back in time, well, first of all, I'd give him some stock advice. I'd give him some money advice and be like, hey, you might want to invest in Amazon. You might want to invest in, some other things, maybe make a little bit more money. But yeah, just having that confidence too, just really just helps out so much more in life. And it's just like how nervous I was when I first started these podcasts and, having all of a sudden, once I got to like the third or fourth podcast, all the nerves are gone when now I could talk to basically anyone, but just realizing that, just take a shot, take a first step and see where it leads. That would definitely be a piece of advice that I would give as well. But now if we were to talk to you a year from today, where would you like to be at in your bodybuilding career? Where would you like to be at in just your regular life? What are some goals that you would like to have accomplished and have done by the time if we were to talk to you a year from today?
Well, hopefully, I will have completed my pro debut, which I'm planning on doing later this year in about November, and I'll be over in the States actually. And then I'll have the Arnold Classic, the pro Arnold Classic. So first time I'll be doing that show as a pro, and that's in March next year. So I'll have those two shows under my belt, and I hope that I've been able to get on that stage and not look out of place with those amazing women, because gosh, the standard is so high. Being a pro is a big jump. So just want to look like I'm meant to be up there. And business wise, I'm really hoping to grow my online training business a bit further. And just be happy, well, living life.
Well, and again, everyone, if you want to check out her online training, I'll leave all of the links, all that stuff down below. Even if you don't want to go to training, just to hear her talk and listen to her accent, I mean, just go and do that. I mean, that's enough in and of itself. But have you ever been to the States before? You're coming later this year.
Yeah, I have. I've been over to the States in 2014. I did a show over in San Diego. Visited Muscle Beach, and oh, that was great. That was amazing. Went to Gold's Gym, so kind of lived that bodybuilding dream. And the show that I'll be going over to is in California, so sort of around that area. So I'll be kind of back over there. Hope to get back to Muscle Beach and have another look at that. And yeah.
I gotta say though, all the Australians that I've had on too, the other two, they've always said, like they've been to California, but I said you've never really been to the real United States until you travel to the middle part of the country, the flyover part of the country, as people like to say. But yeah, I've been to Australia. I mean, I've been to California once, and yeah, I didn't want to come back to Minnesota. But I had to. I mean, that weather is just absolutely perfect every day, and it makes me so angry. Just thinking about that. But now, before we wrap things up, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to, or anything you'd like to give a shout out to?
Well, just my gym. I've got two gyms that I go to. Nemesis Fitness here in Dubbo, and the RSL Health and Aquatic Club. My trainer Clint. I have a US based nutrition coach, Chris or Smitty, as we like to call him. They run an F45 actually over in the US. So yeah, just like all my team. It's such a to be an athlete in bodybuilding, you kind of need to have a team around you. So, yeah, just wanted to shout out to all the people in my corner, basically, because without them, um, getting me through the days where I'm like, I'm going to eat something. And they're like, no, don't do it. So it's great to have that support.
I always say that support system is so key because trying to do this on your own is almost nearly impossible. I mean, we've had one person come on who did it by themselves and they were able to, succeed, but that's just, just a freak accident in my opinion. But just having that support can be so important. And again, you guys go and give Rose a follow on social media. I'll leave a link to all of her stuff down below. And we cannot thank you enough for coming on this show, especially with the time difference. Like I said, we're communicating on different days right now. And it was just such a delight to have you on and talk to you. And we wish you nothing but the best. And I'd love to have you on again and talk about like how you won your first pro show. And yeah, that would be real. Oh, well, everyone, yeah, just go and take a few look at some of her photos and you're like, yeah, she's gonna win her pro card. That's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, I always say everyone go and give her a follow. But buyer beware, you are going to be jealous, you are going to want to stop eating all those Twinkies and get off the couch and start working out. I mean, she just looks unbelievable. And again, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really, really am so honored to be on your podcast, and I really love it. I've been listening to the other girls and all your other interviews, and I'm going to share this with so many people because there's so many people that you've spoken to, and girls can get so much from each different lady's experience. So yeah, great podcast. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. And I always say I like to talk to the girls more than the guys because with guys, here's how the conversation goes with guys when they're talking about health and fitness. Sup, bro? Hey, how much do you lift? That's the end of the conversation. That's basically all. So like with guys, I had a couple guy bodybuilders on, but it just doesn't feel they're like a not talk. So yeah, it's just a different feeling. So that's why I love having and I love having bodybuilders on just in general, just because like we were talking about before we started recording this, just there is that misconception that like these people are just like like superhuman or and stuff like that. But it's just for the general public to just realize, hey, they're normal people just like everyone else. It's just that they have
Yeah.
that dedication, that willpower to go to the gym at the hours that you might not want to go to the gym, and just to do that cardio and to put themselves through that just that basically I like it's a hell, basically put them through that hell that basically transforms them into what you see on stage. So yeah, again everyone, and we cannot thank Rose enough for coming on the show. And this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.